So I think we are ready to start, and we have full house here. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining 5 Common Questions on PCI Compliance webinar brought to you by Expert and McAfee. My name is Mulvin, and I'll be one of co-hosts today and the moderator. Before we start, I want to tell a couple of things. First of all, we are recording this webinar and we'll publish it at our YouTube channel. Of course, we will send the link to all participants. If you do not have good speakers or your voice over IP is not good, you can call at the phone number provided to you upon joining this webinar and by email when you register it. We are going to have this webinar for an hour or so, and we will have questions and answers period after we finish our presentation. Please send your questions to alliance@x-card.com email address during the presentation. I will then read them for Sally. So let me introduce our main speaker today, Sally Baptiste. She's Director of Global Credit Card and Electronic Receipts at McAfee. Sally focuses on payment card industry data security standards and Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and others data protection programs. Sally has more than 6 years experience in this industry. Before joining McAfee in 2010, Sally worked at AT&T Services on senior management position. Also, I'm going to address your questions related to our PA-DSS certified payment application experiments that we may have today. Let me speak a little bit about our agenda for today. So we are going to address several frequently asked questions about PCI compliance that ex-card merchants ask. The first question will be about transparent redirect methods like authorized.net DPM and BrainTree and similar. Also, loading credit card from a PCI compliance service or software through iFrame technology inside shopping cart. Is this PCI compliant? Also, is it enough just to have an SSL certificate and not store credit cards to be compliant? Is it enough just to run PCI and security scans to be compliant? And also a couple of questions about X payments. So, Sally, it's all yours now.
Thank you so much, and thank all of you for joining today. I recognize that we are taking some time out of your day, and hopefully we'll provide you something of value, or at least something that is not quite as painful. When we're talking about the payment card industry data security standard, please note a couple of things. This is not an out-of-the-blue concept. MasterCard and Visa have been doing this for some years. It's only recently been as mandatory as you are feeling. Because in the olden days, shall we say, MasterCard and Visa had their own compliance requirements to keep all kinds of transactions safe and secure, those companies did not feel any need to align their standards. And interestingly enough, to become SDP compliant with MasterCard, you actually were out of compliance with Visa and vice versa. Onto the scene comes TJ Maxx, and suddenly barriers are broken. Now, you, for the most part, are merchants, and PCI compliance responsibility has fallen onto the lap of merchants. There are a plethora of credit cards stored all over the world, but cards in use tend to be used by merchants, and therefore you as a merchant are responsible for achieving and maintaining PCI compliance. As e-commerce merchants, you do not have the luxury of reaching your paw over the counter, grabbing up a credit card, swiping it, handing it back, and calling it a day. You are creating an environment that hackers and crackers really enjoy piggybacking on, if you will, in order to obtain that credit card number for themselves and whatever purposes they have. There are over 350 different points of audit. As a card not present merchant, you can get out of some of them. You don't have MagStripe or Track 1 or Track 2 data. You probably don't have PIN number unless you're taking online debit. But that doesn't mean that you don't have so many line items in the PCI standard that you are sitting here trying to figure out how not to have to even worry about it. It should be untouchable. It should be something that you don't have to deal with. And a lot of the questions that we're seeing and that we're addressing here today have to do with an approach that merchants are taking more and more these days to try not to have to touch PCI compliance, make it somebody else's responsibility. Please understand, you cannot get out of it. You cannot sign over your liability. As the merchant of record, there isn't anything you can do to completely eliminate the responsibility. Why? You get the benefit of card acceptance. You are therefore the liable party. Furthermore, look at the purchase chain. There's the consumer and his bank, the merchant and his bank, and MasterCard and Visa wedged right up in the middle with a big stick they like to call PCI. You, as a merchant, are the only party carrying a contract with clauses of liability. You may have clicked an agreement to accept cards online with your vendor. You may have negotiated for months to allow your processor or direct acquiring bank to give you the best deal possible. But the bottom line is you hold the contract, and therefore you own all of the liability regardless of the actions. Now, please don't take that the wrong way. It's not as bad as it sounds. Owning the liability means you also get to make decisions, and there are ways to ease the responsibility, even though you cannot offload the liability. So let's look at some of these ways and move on to the next slide. One of the more popular ways that's out there these days is a transparent redirect. From a principal perspective, many companies that are out there trying to break into this market are fairly niche-y. Perhaps you've got a transparent redirect method that is specifically tied to a task or a service during the purchase or service delivery model. Perhaps you're using one of the larger ones like off.net or BrainTree. Bottom line is your server hosts a catalog. Your server hosts a cart. Your server does not host the checkout pages. Whichever redirect method you may have selected, your customer is transported from your hosted, owned cart and catalog into another company's web page for the purpose of delivering their payment data. That company will, for the most part, and especially the options that you see here, will do everything they can to mimic your behavior patterns, your layouts, your logos, so that the consumer does not know they are being redirected. Or in other cases, they are actually just using an XML string to host and pick up specific fields so that your page is not the point of capture. Please understand, as the PCI liable party, your connections to these redirect methods are extraordinarily important. Remember, you are hiring these companies to pick up the consumer's card data on your behalf, and you are asking them to do three things. Number one, you're telling them to send that credit card number to somebody who will eventually deposit money into your account. You're trusting them to send it to the right place in the right way to get you the maximum return on your original purchase value. Secondly, you're asking these people to take on all the security vehicles that you are attempting to avoid, be they PCI compliance or personal information protection or any one of hundreds of legislated requirements once you collect information from a consumer. These folks are taking on that responsibility. That's what they do. It's not their job to make the product better, to make the profit margins wider. It's their job to collect that card on your behalf under your name and ship it off someplace so that you can get money. Now, that does satisfy some of the requirements, but your connections to these folks for the protection and for the transmission, and ultimately, third and finally, for that experience that the customer is having with that checkout page. Those things that you're paying them for, you need to make sure that you are attaching to them in a way that does not in any way negate or compromise their security. They will have very specific guidelines as to how you can transparently redirect your customer to their site. Furthermore, you will have very specific guidelines for them as far as how the customer is to be treated, process flow, page layout, things like that, to ensure your customer is treated in the same way you would have. And you are going to have to allow hands-off, but double-check from the sidelines, allow these vendors the opportunity to protect your data in a PCI-compliant manner. Understanding that the PCI standard changes year over year. Yes, I know there's a 3-year cycle, but interpretations by the external forces and the PCI Security Standards Council, along with new evaluations of hackers and crackers and certain issues that have popped up in forensic investigations that are available year over year, have put more emphasis on certain areas of a static standard in year 2 than it had in year 1. Furthermore, clarifying papers, new methods of hacking, and technology changes will require auth.net, BrainTree, any one of your redirect methods to go ahead and upgrade systems and allow for time changes. But these are professionals, and you can usually trust them to do the right thing. When I say that you need to stand back and look at from the sidelines, what you're most probably going to do is to pull back and double check with MasterCard, Visa, or the Payment Card Industry Security Standards Council to ensure the party that you are contracting with, whether or not they're a larger name or a specialty name, anybody where you are transacting that exchange, I'll hand you the customer, you get me the cash somewhere. The fact that you're taking the cards is not my problem. You're going to double check with the powers that be to ensure that these vendors are fully PCI compliant in and of themselves, that what they are doing has already passed muster, if you will. It has already been audited, and it remains audited year over year. But the MasterCard and the Visa websites have notices for third-party payment vendors which show the date that the vendor last passed Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard version X.Y, depending on what year it is, as well as color coding, which is always adorable, showing it red if it's been more than a year ago, 18 months ago that they've passed, showing them in a kind of a yellow status or a green status if they're right at renewal time, and or they have gone through their re-audit in a successful manner. So making sure that they are fully registered as a compliant third-party vendor, making sure you have reciprocity in your contracts that ensure that they will protect your data and you still hold the liability, although you will push it down to your redirected entity if necessary. Always remember one thing when you're selecting one of these types of vendors, your name is still printing on that cardholder statement. If there is a problem with the transaction or if there is any kind of breach, no consumer out there, no newspaper or online publication venue will recognize the fact that you used a third-party redirect method. They're going to know that you are a merchant who got hacked. So make sure you do your due diligence and consult with prior users of the system, as well as working, again, reciprocity and some type of liability into the contracts that you work with these folks. Now, let's look at a different approach, similar in principle. Go on to the next slide and look at the iFrame. The iFrame does a couple of things for you a little bit differently than a redirect. A lot of merchants prefer it because the customer doesn't leave your site, even though a redirect, technically, they're leaving your site and they're being brought right back as soon as the card is successful. A lot of merchants feel that it is an uncomfortable relationship under the concept that it might not turn out just right. They might not get back to your site successfully. Heaven forbid the consumer has internet connectivity problems and didn't even realize it. An iframe is just going to pop up in the middle of your cart while you've got them browsing the catalog and as they're ready to check out and before they go into any kind of card collection data. You as an e-commerce merchant, again, trying to reduce your PCI footprint, choose an iframe. You're going to choose, it's going to act like an embedded pop-up box or a subform or some various type of feature. It doesn't necessarily pop up, but what it does is it nestles inside of your hosted web page, and it provides the consumer a safe place to, once again, drop the data. Now, iframes are not quite as malleable as a redirect. The coding and the behaviors on a redirect page are owned by the redirect vendor, but they're doing their absolute best to do what you ask them to do. With an iframe, you own the frame around this section, and you can put messages and logos and maintain the touch to the merchant. They are simply in fields inside the frame that another vendor owns. Rather than leaving your site, they're inside this frame. When they tab out of it, they're fine. Now, the promise there versus the detriment there, promise, of course, being that they're still at your site, the detriment being the contents of the iframe are not nearly as adjustable. Usually you're going to purchase an iframe, and the layout is going to be the layout you select. There may be a few things or some simple splashes that you can have the vendor add to your iframe, but that doesn't mean that that would be the order of purchase and payment that you would have wanted. It's still a way to have the customer drop the card directly into someone else's hands. And when you're looking at trying to reduce your PCI footprint, this acts just as well as a transparent redirect. When you're purchasing an iframe from someone, obviously it's not the frame that they're selling as much as it is the gateway service or alternative process behind it. They'll give you an iframe to collect that card data at relatively good rates, sometimes even free, if you sign up for the service that takes the payment that they have just collected for you and passes it on to their gateway or processor or ultimately merchant bank so that you can exchange that card number for funds. Understanding that you have used an iframe to get out of collecting the data, you must also understand you cannot use the iframe to get out of the liability. Just like with a transparent redirect method, the name on a card statement is yours, the liability is yours. The owner of that iframe and the processor behind that iframe is connected to you, and therefore is a vendor that you can push back on behind the scenes, but it's not going to be the name of the company in 3-inch high letters in the Wall Street Journal that says, "I was breached." That pleasure is reserved for you, the merchant. So, selecting the processor and installing the iframe is important. But we're going to pop for a second back and think about the transparent redirect while we're thinking about the iframe and answer the question on this slide, is it enough? No, it is not enough. Just like with the transparent redirect method, your use of the iframe is critical. Follow the vendor's instructions. Do not shortchange that vendor by installing any kind of open ports that are capturing the data at the same time your iframe folks are sending you back the response ticket. Be careful how you install that iframe to make sure that it is safe, because hackers are more and more attempting to crack frames in the hosted page using the vulnerability of the hosting outer frame to try to get into the iframe. Now, grant you, you do not own the code behind that, and you're hoping that that iframe is as safe as it possibly can be. But please remember, if there is anything that you can do to assist in the protection of this data, so be it. But remember, you are not completely PCI compliant at that point. Use of an iFrame can be PCI compliant. Use of an iFrame can be non-PCI compliant. The point is, how do you use it? Follow your installer's instructions to the letter. Do not ask questions such as, is this good enough? Anything that is PCI related can be used in a non-compliant form. And it's never quite enough. So let's flip over to the next slide and look at some of the things merchants have been asking over the years since PCI has become a little bit more sturdily enforced. Is it enough not to store the card? Have SSL, have that tunneling, that card in transit encryption? Never store the card and still be compliant. Am I done? There are over 350 points of assessment in the PCI standard. There is no way two behaviors, SSL and no card storage, those two behaviors are never going to be enough to close your PCI. Are they in and of themselves compliant? Yes. Are they all it takes to be compliant? No. A square is a rectangle, but not every rectangle is a square. Remember a couple of places that you may have card behaviors that there is no way a transparent redirect or lack of card storage or any kind of iFrame can protect you. Your customer is going to call you. Your customer is going to ask you questions. Your customer does not know he was in an iFrame or that he was redirected, or if you have provided him with a transaction confirmation number, he didn't write it down. If he did, he didn't keep it. He could care less what it is, spilled coffee on it, can't read his own handwriting, whatever your animal is. That customer is going to call you, and he knows one piece of data. He knows his card number. You chose not to store the card. Therefore, how are you going to support your customers? You chose to use an iFrame. You chose transparent redirect. You do not have that card number anywhere. You need to figure out a way when you are using these methods of avoidance. You need to figure out a way to support the customer when they call in, because remember, the customer only has their card number. They are not normally going to have any piece of lookup information that you need. Now, there will be your customer who knows exactly what's cooking, and they know the shipping number and the tracking and every other swinging thing. But I can guarantee you those are not the customers that are currently screaming. Let's push back another layer. Who else have we got rolling? We've got fax machines all over our environments. And more often, those fax machines run eFax. What better way to support your customer and or other parts of your company than to have those folks fax you and it turns into an email? Rather, call it eFax, you information regarding a transaction. Well, congratulations. You have just placed cardholder data in your email system. That is not something a transparent redirect. That is not something an iFrame. That is not something any kind of hosted alternative service could have protected you against. You now have card data in a place where it requires all 369 points of audit in your email servers of all places. Think about one other department. You can build the perfect world for the customer, and everything can be secure as you please. What is your sales team out there doing? Is your sales team, if you have one, out there inking contracts and having their customers handwrite that credit card number onto an extra sheet as an amendment to that contract? Double check with some of these teams. Is it enough not just to have SSL? SSL is mandatory. It's 1 point out of 369. Congratulations. 1 point. Or is it enough just not to store the number? Are you sure you are not storing that card number? Primary services versus backup services are two different animals. It is most important to know where your card data is. Moving on to the next slide, we had another question along the same lines. Is it enough just to run your scans and to be compliant? Running scans, if you leave them alone and call them scans, will cover 3 or 4 points of the 369. Well, congratulations. On the previous slide, you had SSL. On this slide, you're doing scanning, so that's 4 or 5 more items. You only have 360 some odd to go. This is not enough. There is one way and one way only to avoid PCI compliance, and that's never to accept a card. I am not saying do not be the recipient of the card. I remind you that as a merchant, you are the liable party even if someone accepts that card on your behalf. I need you to remember that the only way to avoid PCI compliance is to completely avoid cards. If you do not take the transaction yourself, but you vend that step, you still have customer service, emails, salespeople to handle. You have back office files that will come in that your scans will not find. Looking back at the redirect, looking back at the iFrame, the companies that you hire to do that are going to send you end-of-day files. The acquirer that they have hired on your behalf or that you may have directly contracted with will send you weekly, daily, monthly files. Some of those files may contain cardholder numbers, and no scan in the world is going to know the contents of the file from a private port-to-port delivery that you are not scanning. Why? Because you're scanning the web pages where you're capturing the data. You're scanning the web pages where you connect to other companies who are scanning the data for you. And this is where scanning becomes critical. Remember, you're thinking about vending collection of that data. You want to make sure that you are properly connected to that vendor to make sure that vendor has the safest, most possibly perfect environment that they're going to have to collect your cardholder data for you under your name with your liability intact. Scanning that connection where you hand off or you nestle their code into your world to connect that card data is one of the best ways to go ahead and make sure you've got your setup correct. So scans are important, but it's not enough. Let's go on to the next slide, and it demonstrates what I'm talking about as far as not collecting the cardholder data. One of the questions that's been floating around out there, some people accept payments with PayPal, and they're told their PCI is not a problem. It's all done. You don't have any PCI things to worry about at all. But other folks use iFrames or redirects or vendors, or they're acquiring bank, be it Paymentech or Bank of America or WorldPay. They all have a method to try to take you, the merchant, out of the loop from the data collection point of view. Why is it the merchant who partners with their processing bank still has PCI impact when the merchant who does the same thing with a pop-up or an iFrame for PayPal does not have that same PCI impact? Bottom line is, once again, the card. With PayPal, e-wallets, or other items, there is no card involved in the transaction. Now, you know as well as I do, PayPal's out there charging the tar out of their card. As soon as you run the transaction, PayPal's going to go and slurp up the money off something, out of their bank account, their credit card, their debit card, something. But that's PayPal's transaction, a separate and unique transaction to which you are neither a contracted nor a liable party. If you go through strictly wallets, you can completely avoid cards and therefore completely avoid PCI compliance, but you will not be able to avoid any kind of personal information protection legislation legislated locally or globally. It just gets you closer. But look at the downside. Yes, you've avoided PCI. Congratulations, you found the way. The downside is not everybody uses these e-wallets, these e-payment methods. You have some people that are uber secure in their concept, and they're aware of identity issues with loose cards, but these people may not necessarily be the exclusive shoppers of your website. So you use something like SagePay from WorldPay as the example in this question. Why do you still have to worry about PCI compliance? Because you're still the liable party in the contract. You're still the merchant of record. Now, WorldPay is your acquiring bank, or Payment Tech, or whoever you have selected in the myriad of acquiring banks out there for e-commerce merchants. They're going to do their absolute best to give you the best product. You still have to connect to it securely, and you still have to cover all the other places in your company where cardholder data may exist. And then you have to double check the processes to make sure that there is no other area in the PCI standard that you need to worry about and you need to look at. So let's drill down for just a minute, and let's put this in a task list. The easiest way to get to your data is while you're collecting it. So selecting a vendor to assist you in collecting it safely is good. That is your outward-facing purchase site. It's also the place where the hackers and crackers know you and know for a fact you have cardholder data. So they're going to want to put their force of will behind your single most vulnerable incoming point, because a card in motion is not encrypted. A card at rest is encrypted, hopefully, but a card in motion tends to have SSL as a tunneled encryption, and that's it. So getting a partner to help you in that actual point of sale is not a bad idea, and it removes quite a bit of responsibility. You've got, as long as you connect to them safely and securely and according to their standards, you've got a lot of storage that has been removed from your hands, so you don't have to worry as much about requirement 3. Your code review and secure programming methods for requirement 6 in the PCI standard would handle either the page in front of leading into the redirect, the page behind getting your data back from the redirect, or the frame around your iFrame where the customer data is actually being installed. You really need to focus on those 2 or 3 pages that have that level of information where you are handing that customer off. Scan the living crud out of it. You're going to make sure everything is SSL protected. You're going to get your partner and any and all PCI items for those 3 pages. You have just reduced your footprint drastically. However, that's not all you have to worry about, because many, many merchants who are e-commerce merchants will forget that they have non-purchase pages. I highly recommend that you look into those non-purchase pages as well. They are just as PCI applicable if you are doing things like having the customer update their card or payment data after they've created their account, sometime after they've made an initial purchase. After all, you want a repeat buyer. You want to make it easy for them to check out. You most probably have a way for them to get regularly updated sale emails or some kind of sponsorship or notice about when you're having a deal that they cannot resist. You probably have an account on file. Not storing a card in a transaction is different from not storing a card on their account. If you are choosing not to store the card, make sure you check both places. Double check with your vendor, your acquirer, your processor to see if they can assist you with that support page, or better yet, don't store an account and a card together. Now, when you're looking at the other portions of the PCI standard, they're not going to be as difficult for you. The things that are not directly related to cards but are directly related to security that are still part of the PCI standard, those are things you're probably already doing. Requirements 1, 2, 8, 12, individual logons, firewalls, access control lists, some type of time coding, NTP servers perhaps, any kind of security policy. Take a few minutes, take a few $100s, invest in knowing what other standards your company supports and is fully compliant with, and where those standards overlap with PCI. So you've just gotten rid of 30 or 40 because you're not a card-present merchant. You've just gotten rid of 40 or 50 more standards because you've gotten a vendor to help you with that point of sale. Now you're going to try to offload 60, 70, maybe even 80 different requirements from a PCI standard in one fell swoop by saying, I do this for SOX. SOX mandate 1.9.c.w, who cares, is the same as PCI standard 8.5.1.a. Get them lined up. Find the other parties in your company that handle your ISO 27001 or your SOX compliance or any kind of company mandated security training or standards. Maybe you've got some specialty training that you have to put your employees through for any kind of governmental contracts you may host in your country or in the U.S. There are specific security requirements that you have to do for a lot of things. Piggyback on them. What happens if you update one line item in a major corporate security standard and it closes 15 PCI items? Then all you're doing is double checking with the ISO owner and the SOX owner and this owner and that owner to make sure that all employees have been aware of this and or all systems require that everybody has their own individual logon, some variation of that theme. Remember, you have reduced cards completely away from your point of sale. Now you're worrying about salespeople and customer service people and the back office and chargeback files, which means it's less system drawn and more people drawn. So look for the places where these people are already being affected, and you can wrap up several more PCI items. Can you get out of PCI? Yes. But only if you do not take cards. Do not hire someone to take cards on your behalf. Do not get financial gain from an exchange of cards, or in no way are a merchant of record. Don't try to look at PCI as something to get out of. Look at PCI as something to leverage. Don't hire vendors, get partners. Make sure your partners are fully PCI compliant. And double check the nature of their compliance. Is your partner compliant for the service you signed up for? Just because auth.net is listed as a PCI vendor doesn't mean that the service that you have purchased from PCI, from your PCI compliant vendor, is the service that they have been certified for. If you're looking at your third-party vendor listing on MasterCard and Visa or the PCI Security Standards Council website, it will specifically tell you what services that vendor has been completely PCI vetted against. But also remember that PCI DSS is not the same as PA-DSS. Does it get you to the same place? Absolutely. But PA-DSS is a slightly different behavior pattern. Looking into PA-DSS, it's a payment application that has already been certified as fully compliant by the Data Security Standards Council and therefore covering merchants in just about any situation for the behaviors that that software performs on their behalf. The difference between a vendor that is PCI certified and a software that is PA-DSS certified is that that software was certified in the host data centers of the standard. There wasn't an auditor that came out on site to the merchant or the vendor, poked around, saw what he saw, certified it according to the understanding of the process, the layout, and the setup. PA-DSS certified software is actually shipped to the council, to the host, and they run it through the rigors of their testing in their environment. So your behavior patterns are going to be slightly different. The auditor checked the vendor on site, and what the auditor saw was fine. Or the auditor brought the software to them, flipped it over, shook it upside down, rattled it with everything they had, and couldn't break it. Recognize the difference in the practice. PCI certified vendors to help you with your hosting are fantastic. Know their borders. Know where their protection and their security and their activities stop and your responsibilities kick back in. You've always got the liability, but know where your responsibility kicks back in. From a PA-DSS certified concept, never, ever select a software that is PA-DSS certified and fail to use it in a compliant manner. That software goes only so far, and your borders are very, very well defined. But if you do not use it safely, you have wasted your time. So it depends on the needs of your business which approach you're going to want to take. But look at the standard, look at what you're already doing, and look at the portions of your service that you can vend. In a very good world, with a minimum number of vendors, you actually may be able to take all 369 points of audit and reduce it to 12 or 15 things that you still have to answer year over year. Do you have a security policy? Yes. Is it published? Yes. Does everybody have a logon? Yes. Are we all taught to be careful? Yes. You're PCI done. Be careful to get the right vendor, the right software, the right systems, use them in the right ways, and know what your back office is doing, and know what parts of your company can be leveraged. They could be doing your PCI work without them even knowing it. But ultimately, protect that point of sale. If it's yourself or through a vendor, protect it. So let's talk. Let's flip this back to Alex, actually, and going on to the next slide. I believe it's time to talk about X payments.
Thank you, Sally. And I'm going to tell a couple of things about X payments. X payments is our PA-DSS certified software that works as an intermediary between the shopping cart and payment gateway for PCI compliant credit card processing. And I want to tell you guys that we're going to rename it to X-Card payments. That's done for better recognition by our customers, partners, and other organizations that may need to check for X-Card on the PCI Council website. And as you should know, as you understand, we're better known as X-Card, not as X-Payments. For those who use X-Payments at the moment, there is no need to upgrade or reinstall X-Payments. Our PA-QSA organization advised us that both names, X-Payments and X-Card payments, will be in use, so you should not have any PCI compliance troubles with this rename. So that's the first thing I wanted to announce about X-Payments. Also, I wanted to address one of the frequently asked questions about X-Payments, how to host it. X-Payments, as I said earlier, is a separate payment application that was certified under PA-DSS requirements, and actually it can be installed on the same hosting with your shopping cart software. But in this case, X-Payments should be run in a separate PCI compliant host environment. It can be a virtual private server, it can be a dedicated server, or it can be shared hosting to an account. But provided there is no other software installed and run under this account. And I think we can go to questions and answers section of our presentation. We have, Sally, we have a couple of interesting questions. One of them is, what if your customer emails you their credit card number and you never asked for it? Is it their responsibility if it got acquired by a hacker, since they were irresponsible with their information?
That's always one of my favorite points. You've got a couple of things at play here. No matter what happens, the customer is never wrong. If that customer accidentally left their wallet in the middle of the street, no transaction performed against any of their cards would be their fault. Who is the only place that there's a contractual liability? It's with the merchant. Now, what you do have is a little bit of protection when it comes to stray incoming transactions. If your customer follows a path that you, A, did not define for them, B, that you immediately addressed both with them and within your system, then you as a merchant will probably not be held liable for a line item breach. Any transactions hit against that card will be considered fraud, and fraud is a different topic from PCI liability. So what you would need to do, talking through a specific situation, customer emails you a credit card, my goodness, not what you expected, immediately remove the credit card from the email, maybe leaving last four. Reply to the customer, please, for their own safety and security, not just don't email it to me, but don't ever email your credit card number to anyone. We will do our best to look into your transaction and assist you in any way possible, but we recommend for your own safety not to send your cards either to us or to anyone via email. The attempted education will go far. Well, as far as they decide to hear it. Then you've printed the email, or you've got the card number. You take it out of that email as much as you possibly can, and eventually your email servers will roll over. The backup tapes will not be out there anymore to back up your servers, and slowly but surely that card number will be gone. In the meantime, perhaps you're walking around with a printed version that you shred at the first opportunity, and you assist the customer with their query. But you must define the path as being non-standard and therefore non-secure for the purposes of your audit. Tell the customer, cut it out. Tell the auditor, we do not accept cards via email. Once in a while, if you get them, do everything in your power to get rid of the card and not to fully infiltrate your email servers. You're okay. Nobody's going to catch you for failing to encrypt that card.
So one more question about, I'll just read it as it is. I would like to ask whether PCI compliance is required with transparent redirects to an external payment application. An attacker could possibly change the redirect address, but as far as I know, PCI is only applicable for cardholder data, which does not go through the shop.
PCI compliance is applicable for any cardholder data where the merchant receives financial benefit. Period. Doesn't matter if it goes through the shop or not. So you are still liable for anything that you run through the redirect. The thing of it is, you are no longer responsible for it because you have run it through the redirect. You'd still have PCI responsibilities for things such as stray incoming data, response on chargeback files and chargeback paper documentation incoming from your processing bank, end-of-day files, which carry the card number in clear script, all of the different things that happen after the point of sale. Additionally, there are security standards that you must adhere to from a general CSO level, kind of we have a major policy, you must adhere to those kinds of things. If you redirect, use a transparent redirect method, you are getting rid of perhaps anywhere from 40 to 60 different points of PCI. You're not getting rid of everything. You are still liable for any transaction that vendor takes on your behalf, even though you do not own that redirected web page, even though you do not collect or see or even sniff that cardholder number. You're liable. So get yourself a good redirect partner, because what you're doing is hiring someone to be responsible. You are still liable as the merchant. And do not wait for your bank to mandate PCI compliance from you. It has been in place and it's codified. It is actually legislated in some areas around the world. The EU has reference to it in their line items. Federal level information references PCI standards. So do not wait for something like the bank didn't ask me, therefore I didn't do it. Do not consider your vendor completely in charge of everything until you ensure that everything that you've given them is everything there is. But yes, PCI applies to the transaction even after you've redirected it. You're just assigning that PCI to the redirected party. Does that, I'm hoping that's exactly where you were going.
So, okay, we have a couple of questions that actually Sally spoke about, but I do know that they are very popular on our own NextCard forum, so I'll just read them. PayPal is my sole credit card provider now. We dropped all others. So they do PayPal accounts for us as well as normal credit cards. Is that PCI compliant?
Which card was that? That was the sole card left?
PayPal. It does
PayPal is not a
payment
card.
processing for PayPal payments and credit cards, yes. Is that PCI compliant? So it's their only credit card processor now.
Right, right. There's a lot to be said for making that decision. It's a very hard decision, and sales may suffer because of it. And I'm going to answer this question in more of a legal way, and I apologize. But you have dropped all forms of payment except an e-wallet, such as PayPal, Click and Buy, Yandex, WebMoney, whatever. You've only got a wallet left. You do not have cards. 100% of the entire PCI standard became not applicable. You do not file. It is not necessary. You do not have to audit. It is not necessary. It is not that you're fully PCI compliant, because technically you don't have a single card. No customer can call you with a card number even and expect you to be able to answer the question, because that's not how they paid. You don't have any PCI impact whatsoever. For the purposes of your day-to-day behavior, yes, you can consider yourself fully PCI compliant. But in actuality, what you have done is completely avoid PCI altogether. You don't even have to think about it. And furthermore, there are many different wallets out there, especially if you're going to try to go global. A lot of places are trying to provide a wallet for the purposes of your behaviors, for those of you who do not want to take cards at all. You do not have a contract with an acquirer. You have no liability for PCI whatsoever. But you better protect that PayPal account name, because PayPal is just as cranky about their accounts as MasterCard and Visa is about their card numbers. But yes, you have strictly and completely avoided 100% of all PCI with the use of only e-wallets. Go ahead.
Actually, that Elaine also mentioned that PayPal does credit card processing for him too. Perhaps you didn't hear that when I was saying PayPal processes credit cards. Yes. And
yeah, now
I
that
think that
you're
depends
using
also on.
If you're using the express payment vehicle such that you are actually accepting cards through PayPal, then you're still accepting cards. You're still fully PCI necessary. It's the use of only PayPal, a non-card vehicle, that will get you out of it. Using cards through PayPal is just the same as using cards through CyberSource or Off.net or anybody else. It's still a card. So you do not have full PCI coverage if a vendor accepts cards on your behalf, even if that vendor is PayPal.
Okay, so we have another very good question. It's again about emailing credit card details, but it's a very interesting situation here. So I'll just read it. We have at times asked foreign customers to send us credit card information in 2 separate emails. Half of the number in one email and the other half and the expiry date in another. Is this better security-wise?
Obfuscation is not considered a security measure. It is technically making it a little bit more difficult for the hacker or cracker, but it is in no way, shape, or form protecting the data any better. Anybody who is monitoring that open network, because emails are definitely an open network item, they're going to be able to pick that up. And remember, your customer is also most probably using the same title of the email, using Part 1 or Part 2 designations, having, heaven forbid, once in a while you'll even find the brilliant customer who uses the first email and replies all to it to put the rest of their card data on there. Furthermore, there are specific characters within a card number that may be displayed as clear script and other characters which may not. It is not wise ever to encrypt that card data. If there is no way other than email for you to obtain that card number, please still apply PCI compliance, but think low-tech. Have the customer drop it in a Word doc and use one of the free software applications to encrypt it. Have the customer, for example, WinZip it and password protect it, all the entire card number, everything in one piece of paper in one document. WinZip it, AES 256, encrypt it, and ship it to you. Make sure this is an out of the ordinary or non-standard behavior pattern, because you don't want to have to include your email servers in anything if you can avoid it. Maybe they ship it to you and you open it up and you print it out and delete the email as much as possible. Remember to remind them to put that password for that WinZip document in a separate email. Do not include the password with the same document. The same effect as if you had Part 1 and Part 2 of the card number. Unfortunately, putting Part 1 and Part 2 of the card number does not satisfy PCI because the entire card number is in clear script, and only the first 6 and last 4 characters can be in clear script. The remaining characters may not be. So unless you're planning to lose those 6 characters out of the middle of the card number, there is no way that they can parcel it out into 10 different emails and still technically be fully compliant. You cannot guarantee shipment via SSL or any other tunneling concept that while the data is not protected, maybe the communication method is because you're using straight email. Therefore, I recommend that if there is no other way, and this is definitely the exception to the rule, explain fully to your customer what your intent is to have the card fully encrypted in a completely separate email or maybe a voicemail. Put down their password to get into the encrypted WinZipped document that they have emailed to you. Even more low-tech and perhaps something that you might prefer is if you have a hardline fax machine that does not go to email. I'm not talking an eFax. I'm talking about a real hard, down-to-earth wired machine that you can place into a locked closet with that fax number available, have the customer's hand write it down, fill out a form, whatever the particulars are, and fax you their card data to your fax number that is in a locked room. The cleaning people are not going to wander in and out, and your folks who are definitely intent upon using that card data to complete a purchase or to acknowledge receipt for any kind of security reasons, those people would have access to the locked key in that storage room. Go pick up the day's faxes. Make sure the thing stays full of paper. Keep the door locked at all times, but just go in periodically and fetch them. You have to remember a couple of things, though. If you're going to use either a printed email, a printed unzipped Word document, or a hardline, non-eFax piece of paper, you have to make sure that you have the appropriate shred capabilities when the document is done, or dual control lock capabilities, a lockbox or safe inside of a locked closet. So it takes two people to access that ClearScript cardholder data. Also note that if you have an employee whose job it is to data enter that card number into a place, the desktop and the network segment of that employee is in scope for PCI. This is a relatively new viewing of card in motion requirements. You must have all of requirement 9, including cameras, 3 months of data storage, and video monitoring against a desktop which is capable of data entering a full card number, even if you, the merchant, do not own the software into which the card is being typed. Don't care. You're typing it straight into AmericanExpress.com. I'm happy for you. Amex owns the SSL. Amex owns the web page. Amex owns the security. You own the desktop of that employee. That desktop needs to have full PCI protection as though it's a data center. Requirement 9 on all card-capable employee desktops. Go ahead, Alex.
Okay, I think we should ask you one last question. A very good question. Where do I get the list of all the requirements to be compliant? I believe it's on the PCI Council website. Well, guys, you can just go to the PCI Council website and get all the requirements there. They are updated every time when PCI Council releases a new set of requirements. Okay, one last question for today, and it's about a company that does some services and they sell them online. And when they sell a service to a customer, they don't know the total amount that will be after the service is provided. So usually they do something like that. They take a credit card from a customer, for example, by email encrypted with PGP. They do the service, and then after the service that can take more than a month or even a quarter, they charge as much as they need. So is that PCI compliant? What should they do if they are not?
It's not a matter of PGP being PCI compliant or not being PCI compliant. PGP is just a method of encrypting the data, and it would satisfy, if used properly, one of the 300 plus points of audit. So every other line item standard would have to go. The difference between this merchant and the additional problems that they may have, because they're storing the card for months upon months prior to actually executing the charge, this merchant must provide a secure storage vehicle or location for this cardholder data while it's in residence. Please remember, storage means card data which is at rest in excess of 60 seconds. A lot of merchants think that they are indeed not storing. This customer is an example of a merchant who knows very well they're storing for months and months and months. That means that that cardholder data, while it is at rest awaiting the service order to be complete and the charge to occur, that entire environment into which that cardholder data is stored is fully subject to all points of audit for PCI, as are all employees who have access to that area. Furthermore, it is recommended that that area be segmented from the rest of the internal company, lest a hack somewhere in the other side of the company actually accidentally get a bad guy over into the cardholder storage area. If you are going to do something like that and you choose not to do any kind of encryption, it may be worthwhile to tokenize and go through an alternative vendor and let that vendor store that data for 3, 4, 5 months. And when the order is complete, hit the token. It still means you are PCI liable, but now you do not have the extra overhead, security, audit, firewalls, ACLs, everything tied to creating a safe storage environment. Remember, your backup tapes and disaster recovery are every bit as in jeopardy as that point of sale. So any cards you store more than 60 seconds in any place in your company is a card that brings down the entire PCI standard for that environment. So if you're storing for that long, make sure you're storing safely.
Okay, so I think that's all for today. We've recorded this session, and I'll follow up everyone who attended and who couldn't make it to get to the webinar because of the number of attendees limitation. I'll send a link to a YouTube video with this webinar. Thank you everyone for attending us today, and have a great day. Thank you, Sadie, for joining us too. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks, everyone.